Good morning, I'm Reva with Quality Sewing, and today we're going to take a look at buttonholes and buttons. So I don't know about you, but my mom would never do buttonholes. We had a neighbor, a friend of mine's mother actually, who was just I think she was a saint because she would sew all the buttonholes on any project my mom was making. I mean, seriously, who does that? She was just a lovely lady. But on a side note, her seam length or her stitch length was so tiny that you could never remove any seam. So I wouldn't have wanted to have an error if that was the seam length I chose. Anyhow, but we're going to look at them and we're going to see how easy it is to make buttonholes. So you don't have to be afraid of buttonholes. And in the olden days, there was a big attachment you had to put on, and machines today have the buttonholes built right into the machine and its capabilities. So we're going to look at different ways machines make buttonholes and also the different types of buttonholes, and then we're going to talk about sewing on buttons. So on a basic mechanical machine, this machine has something called a 3-step buttonhole. So if you take a look right here, it says 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1 is going to do the left leg of the buttonhole. 2 will do the bar tack down at the bottom. 3 will do the right hand thingy, leg, and then the bar tack up at the top. And so I'm going to get into the little cubby here, and I am going to get out the buttonhole foot. And that's an important thing to use because every foot is different and serves its proper purpose. And you're going to notice that on the bottom side of, the bottom side of the foot is where you find some of the information. Now this one is a little bit different because the whole foot looks wacky and different, but you can see a foot has some sort of grooves in there. Now let me set that foot down, and I'm going to put back on my little arm here, and let's talk about the buttonhole foot. It fits this way, okay, and it has this groove where you can stitch your buttonhole. And then on the back side, it has grippy, so it holds onto the fabric. So we're just going to slip this little guy on, and then we're going to talk about our fabric. And I will feed this little thread down underneath, so I have all my threads under the foot and to the back, which is a great way to start. Now, when you're working with a buttonhole and you're creating it from a pattern, or like a dress pattern or pants or something like that, you're going to see in the instructions that it tells you to have the fabrics with interfacing in it. And interfacing is a stabilizer for the fabric, so that way the fabric doesn't take the abuse of the thread and what we're asking it to do, and it will stay nice and flat afterwards. So on a button placket, you would have interfacing the whole way down. It's kind of like stabilizer for embroidery, but a lot of times for embroidery we remove that stabilizer, so it's not the same stuff. They're not mutually exchangeable. So you're going to want to make sure that you follow those instructions. If you're doing a home deck project and you're not using a pattern, you just want to put a buttonhole in, then you might consider having some interfacing in there. And you can look at this, the weight of the interfacing to the weight of your fabric. It kind of goes in play that way. Okay, so we want to have a buttonhole, and we're going to make a 1-step buttonhole. Now, a 3-step buttonhole. If you're doing that, then you need to, we're going to set up the machine, but then we're also, and I should say 4-step, I don't know why I said 3, but you're going to need to mark your fabric. So, and if you're working with a pattern, it will have this on your pattern piece. So one thing you're going to need, I'm going to turn it this way so I can draw a straight line. Sorry, I'm left-handed. You're going to have to deal with it for a second. You need to know how long your button is. Okay, now that's a little bit longer, so I'm going to draw a new line because I really don't have a button that big. But let's say I have a button that is that long. Okay, that's where I need to cut. Then we're going to need to make our bar tacks. So you need to know where your buttonhole is to start and where it needs to stop. So here's where I want it to start and here's where I want it to stop. The reason why I made them so big is I'm hopefully going to be able to see it when I put it under the foot. Okay, maybe I want this side to come out a little bit farther because I want to be able to see it. Okay, does that, I hope that makes sense. Okay, and so you would mark that on your fabric, and I am using a friction pen, so that will go off with the heat of an iron. Okay, so now I have the foot all the way back, and I don't really need it to be all the way back because I need to do the bar tack. So I'm going to give it a little bit of slack. So I'm going to come in just one notch, and I'm going to put my needle down into the fabric and then put my foot down. Now, if you can see from this side, I've centered that area there, where we're going to cut, and it's on that start line. Okay, so now let's take a look at the machine. I have it set for 1, and then we need to change our stitch length. With a buttonhole, you want the stitches to be fairly satin, so you don't always do a test because you want them tight, but you don't need them so tight that it's crazy, right? So now we're simply going to sew, and we're going to sew until we reach that line, and we stop. I'm going to go one more. Okay, there we're at the spot. Now I'm going to raise my needle up out of the fabric because we're going to switch to 2, and your needle might move a little bit, and I do think I advanced a smidge, so I'm going to come back a little bit. Then we're simply going to sew the bar tack, okay, and maybe make it a little bit wider. I needed to make the width a little bit wider on the machine up there, and now I'm out of there. I'm good. I'm going to go over to number 3 now, which will go in reverse, and it will stitch the right side. And then when I get to my stopping point, see, I can see it right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to 4, and I will complete our bar tack at the top. Okay, and you don't need to go crazy with how many bar tacks you do. You just need enough to secure that top. And so now we'll trim our threads, and you can see we have a nice little buttonhole. One way to cut your buttonhole, so you don't cut through, you don't want to cut through your bar tack, you just want to cut in here, is to put a straight pin across here. So tuck it in and go just under the bar tack there and just over the bar tack there. Then you can use your seam ripper and start here and slit up, and then that pin will keep you from cutting through your fabric. But I'm going to go and just give it a little bit of a nip, and then you have to be really careful if you're doing it this way. But this is how you open your buttonhole. And now it's ready for a button. Okay, now we'll talk about sizing here in a minute when I get the buttons out, but that's how you do it on a mechanical machine with a 4-step buttonhole. So now let's come over here to this machine here, and I'm going to slip him back a smidge. Ooh, that was a good sound, wasn't it? Ooh, tables on wheels, sorry. All right, so let's take a look at this machine. Now this machine has oodles of buttonholes in it. It has just quite a nice number of them, and how it does a buttonhole is different. So I thought that we would go through some of the buttonholes, and so you could see the differences up close. Oh, I cut that one off. Oh, you'll have to deal with it. Okay, so you'll have some that have a rounded edge and a standard top to them, and they do different things. One with a little rounded edge like this that is straight on the sides and with just one rounded end is usually for lightweight to medium fabrics. Some machines will call it a blouse buttonhole, and that is what they are used for. You may have a bar tack across the top. You may have a bar tack that runs this way. And this one is considered a reinforcing. If the stitches go this way, it's considered a reinforcing bar tack. This one tapers to more of a point, and since it has multiples, this also is a reinforcing bar tack. And on a blouse buttonhole, they're traditionally stitched this way with center. I guess it would be on this side, wouldn't it? But this would be where your button would land when you're putting it on your garment. So this would be toward your center front, and then the rest of the buttonhole would be it would be horizontal. Okay, and on a men's shirt, they usually go up and down. Okay, so now this is a standard buttonhole that has a standard bar tack. It's square, very similar to what we were working on just now. And if you find one that is called a narrow, it's for light to medium fabrics. That means it is a more petite buttonhole, not a big beefy one. Okay, so we'll get into some more beefy ones here in a minute. So that would be a standard buttonhole. Okay, now if you see one that has zigzags on it, that is a stretch buttonhole. So that's good for knit fabrics, for like fabric. We can buy a lot of fabrics today for clothing that isn't knit, but it has stretch because it has lycra in it. This is meant for those fabrics because it has give to it, because it has the zigzags. Then you have one that has like a cross stitch on the sides, and that's a pretty buttonhole. It's good for heirloom garments because it has more of a dainty look to it. It's not as thready, and it also has stretch, so it's good for those stretch fabrics. We have a bound buttonhole, and all it does is a straight stitch around the buttonhole area, and that is designed for making a bound buttonhole. Then we get into some more heavyweight type of things, and this is where you're going to find a standard buttonhole with a rounded end, but it's called a keyhole. See how it kind of bulges out at the end? A keyhole buttonhole is made for heavyweight fabrics where you're going to have a larger button or one with a shank, and thick fabrics, jeans, wool, things like that. Okay, so we're going to look at that in a minute too. And then there's different ends. There's the tapered one, which again is a reinforcement. There's one with the bar tack going up and down, and again that's a reinforcement. But those three are all keyhole buttonholes, so they again are for thick fabrics. Then in the buttonhole classification, there's also an eyelet that you could use for decorative purposes. You can also use it to put like a lacing port in a garment or a belt. And then there's also the sew-on button stitch itself. And if you guys have any questions, just yell them out, or better yet, type them, because then we can read them and we can get to them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take this foot off, and I'm going to grab the buttonhole foot for this machine, and it is a little bit different than what you just saw. Okay, so this one, I'm going to grab, I have a button. Where did I put them? Right here. Okay, so here's my buttons. How this one works is the front of the button says, on this one says A, and it's imprinted there. The back opens up, and you slip your button into it, so you're going to be able to get the right size buttonhole for your button. If we were working with our standard one here, what we would need to do is measure our button. Yes, sorry, again, left-handed. Tried doing it with my right hand, it doesn't work. We would need to measure our button and give a little bit of space because of the thickness of the button for it to get in and out. Okay, so that's how you would do that. But for this one, all we need to do is, place the button right in the back of the foot and pinch it down so it's nice and secure. And then we're going to place this onto our machine just like you would any other foot. Now the back side of this also has that grip-em on it, so it's going to be able to hold our fabric and make sure it's nice and secure. And I am going to run my thread down underneath that foot. I think I am. I'm going to try to. Well, maybe not. Okay, we pretended like we did. Okay, so now I'm just going to put my fabric in here, but now I don't have to worry about the right size. Okay, so what I am going to do though is up under here, there's this little lever that we're going to pull down. Can you see him coming there? And I need to pull my buttonhole foot forward. I'm going to try. Sorry, Carrie, I cannot do it. I'm trying to reach her this way. And we just want the paddle that we pulled down in between those two stoppers. Okay, and that's what's going to tell the machine what size to make the buttonhole. Okay, so now let's come over to the machine and take a look. Now, you're going to find that your buttonholes are most likely in your utility menu. They're not really considered a decorative stitch, they're just utility. So we're going to go ahead and we'll grab one of the buttonholes. If you have a machine that has quick buttons on here for the most popular, a lot of times a buttonhole will be on there, but I see right here that we have our buttonhole section here, and let's do a blouse buttonhole. I'm going to choose stitch number 77, and there's our buttonhole. Okay, so now we have our button in place, we have our little paddle down, and now all we're going to do is tell it to sew, and it's going to work its way back. I'm going to stop it for a second and see if I can't get it. Oh, look what I just did. Just for trying to get that thread out of there, I may have messed myself up. Let's find out, shall we? We might get to do it again, which is, just such a nice learning opportunity, right? Okay, yeah, I think we're going to do it again, which means now I have a cut thread. Okay, we are going to go here, and then I'm going to just go back to stitch number 77. Okay, let's try it now. All right. So notice how it gives us a nice basting stitch. So it made a base stitch first, a straight line, then it stitched the button leg, and now it did a base stitch again, and it just did the round part in the front, and then it will work its way to the back where it will do a standard bar tack, because that's the one I chose. Okay, now we'll cut the thread. And now if you take a look, this is a lovely buttonhole. Let me get that little stray thread that was, irritating me so much. You have a beautiful buttonhole. It's the right size for a button, so I am going to do my same thing again. I'm going to fold and clip and just clip into the ends. Okay. All right, so there's our buttonhole. And then let me take that button, and you can see that the button just fits through there just very nicely. Okay, so that is the proper size buttonhole for this button. Okay, all right, so now we've done those two styles. Now we're going to look at a different machine and how it makes its buttonholes, because every machine is a little bit different. The two styles that we showed you are very are very comparable or similar for a lot of different machines. So you're going to find those on a lot of machines, but then you'll have some that will do something a little bit different. So in this machine, we're going to go to our buttonholes. Now it has everything. So if you notice, it has a 4-step if you want to do it that way. It has all the other ones, the knit, the heirloom. It has all those buttons. It even has a double rounded one, which is really lovely, especially if you're going to be doing gifts or projects that need maybe a drawstring on them. Let's do a keyhole so you can see how that works. Now, I'm going to take this foot off, and this buttonhole foot, it does come with a standard one like we did on the very first machine if we should want to do the 4-step buttonhole. But then we have this guy right here. This is the A+ foot. Now notice it has our little slide out here, and that is for our button. So I'm going to go ahead and reach over here and grab our little button that we were using. And it's the same thing. You pinch it in there, but notice it's in the front now, not the back. And this particular buttonhole foot looks very similar, except for look at how big of a buttonhole you can do. You have tons of space here, and you have this thingy-majigger. This is this part goes flat to the machine, and the fabric goes in between this little foot sandwich. So let's get it on the machine first. Come on. And ooh, get the thread out of the way because he doesn't need to be trapped in there. That's one thing to remember, is that your thread should not get trapped in the connector for the foot. So let's just put him, come on, you can do it. I can aim correctly. I know I can. I've done it before. There we go. Okay, so now I have my foot on, and I'm going to give it that college try, see if I can get him in there where I can get him out. I think I did it. I think I did it. Okay. Try not using a really thick pair of scissors to do that. Well, shall we take a vote? Oh, wait. I was going to say, let's take a vote. Shall we just have a shaggy buttonhole? No, we're fine. Okay, so now we have our buttonhole on there, right? And it knows that the A+ foot is on. Now, what makes this buttonhole system different is that this machine actually has a built-in camera. So it's going to, it sees the foot, and it's going to be able to tell the size of the buttonhole based on the location of these 3 dots, and it's going to make us a perfect buttonhole. So I'm going to slip our fabric under and let it do its thing. And of course, if this was a real project, I would still be marking where I want that buttonhole to go. And you also want to pay attention. Does it start in the front and work its way back, or does it start in the back and work its way front? So you do want to pay attention to those. But we're just going to push go and see what it does. So now it's automatically making the buttonhole the right size, and I haven't done anything to tell it the size. I didn't pull down a lever or anything. It's just automatically making it. Now, some buttonholes, like I said, some manufacturers, the machine will start in the back and work its way forward, and then create the buttonhole. So it's very important that you pay mind to that, so you have the right buttonhole. Okay, now let's go ahead and cut that thread and take a look at our beautiful keyhole buttonhole. Isn't that, I mean, that's just so pretty. Let's just trim that off. And if you are going with tradition, you would maintain the same color of thread on the top as you would your fabric. But this is so much fun, and they turn out so beautifully. You can definitely have a contrasting fabric in there, or thread, I'm sorry. So then again, you would just cut here, and then on the end that's rounded, you would take an awl, or if you want it to be easier, there is a punch from OESD that will punch out that little circle for you, and you would use that on eyelets as well. And then that is what gives you the space to come in here. Now, the reason for that little keyhole, I'm going to try to trim him out just a little bit. I'm just making notches in him so I can get the bulk of that fabric out of there. The reason a keyhole buttonhole is very useful is if you're working with a button that has a shank like this. Okay? These you're going to hand sew on, but what happens is when the button is in the buttonhole, then that shank rests up in the keyhole area, and it has the thickness to accommodate the shank. So that helps the garment lay flat, helps the wool or the heavy denim or whatnot not to distort, and it gives it a nice seat for the buttonhole to go into. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So now let's talk about sewing on the buttons. Okay, so let's take this buttonhole foot off, and let's talk about sewing on buttons. Now, you have a stitch on your machine. If it was the first machine we did, it's the bar tack itself. It's 2 and 4. Steps 2 and 4 would give you the ability to sew on a button. On the second machine we did, it has this stitch, and then this third one has the stitch as well. And all it is a zigzag stitch that goes nowhere. And there is a special foot for this machine to help you stitch on a button. Now, if you're using a mechanical machine like our very first machine, you're going to want to make sure to test the width that you're doing, because you need your zig to go in one hole and your zag to go in the other, and you do not want it to hit the plastic of the button, because then it will break and it's just, then you don't have a button. It's just sad. So those are some things that you want to be aware of. This little guy here is pretty cool, because what he does is he has this little see the little spring right there? That opens up and it will hold the button in place so you can stitch on your button. Okay, so I'm going to slip this on without the button in there. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, come on, there we go. There we go. Now he's on. So now he's all happy. I'm going to give myself a little bit of tail, because it's easier to trim it away than to lose the whole thing because you didn't have it hold of it. Okay, so now to put it on, my foot is up, and I'm going to take the button and I'm going to place it here and slide it up underneath. Now there he is. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the foot down, and I'm going to test to see if I'm in the right spot. And test is a good word for buttonholes. You want to pre-test the size of your buttonhole on a scrap of fabric and everything. You want to make sure that you have it right. So now I'm going to test up and I test down, and I'm just using the hand wheel to make sure that my holes are in the right spot and that I'm clearing. And now I can just say go, and it's going to stitch it for me. And notice it made a knot. How lovely is that? And then I'm going to cut the thread, and it raised the foot for me, and now I have one of my little bar tacks done for my button. Okay, so now that it's attached, I don't need to slip it in there. All I need to do is slip it forward and put the foot down and make sure I'm gonna miss. There's one, there's two. Okay, now I can just tell it to go, and it's going to stitch that button on. Okay, now there's another. I'm going to just really ruin a nail here in a second, so let me see if I can get this out. I have one of those metal shards that's in that holds the buttons on the button card. Okay, so I have another button. Now let's talk about a different way of putting them on. If you're wanting to use, you're using thick fabric, you're using denim, whatever it might be, but you want to use a standard button instead of one with a shank like this, then you have options. Okay, there's a way to turn this into a shanked button. So what I'm going to do is get my thread, and I'm going to pull myself a fairly long strand of it. Okay, then I'm going to find the location I want my button to go, and then let's place our button in place, and we'll test it again in a second, but I'm going to get him in the general area. Now on the back of this buttonhole, can you see right on this foot, I'm sorry, right over here, there's a little clear lever, and I'm going to push that forward. See that little, did you see the little piece that came forward? I'll do it again. See him coming forward? What this does is it gives it a high rise, or it gives it a it's like having a platform shoe, I guess. And what that's going to do, let me hand test and make sure that we're in the right spot. Okay, so can you see how the thread is looping up and over that? That is a piece that makes the thread bar tack be full of more thread, longer threads. And what that's going to do for us is it's going to, I'm not getting a, hold on, there we go. And what it's going to do for us is it's going to give that extra length, and we're going to make our own shank. Okay, now I'm going to put the needle up, but I'm not going to cut the thread because I want to pull it out there and give myself, whoops, I just unraveled him is what I did. Well, good, that worked out really great. Let's do it again. Do not do that. Be careful when you pull it out. Okay, I'm going to set him down, make sure he's in the right spot. And make sure he goes over there. Okay, we're going to stitch it again. And this time I'll be more careful when I pull it out, because he is not attached to anything. So when I pull, I'm going to just be gentle here. And let me actually pull some thread out from the needle here, so that way I can easily come and pull this out. And now I have a long thread here. So now what I want to do is flip it over and see if I can get a hold of those threads from the back. Okay, there's one of them. Let's see. Is that another one? Okay, so this will give you a general idea. Since I had started over, I may not have, oh, there maybe he is. Let's see if I can grab that other one. There we go. Just grab the loop. So what I was doing was pulling on the bobbin thread and then pulling up. So now the whole idea, now that I pulled them all the way through, I probably should not have. I was just so excited. You want to pull them down through the button and out through the hole, because what you want to do is take it and wind it around the button, and then that will give it the shank. Should I show you that again? I think I'll show you that again because I messed it up. I got so excited, you know. So let's just take all this stuff off and we will make another shanked buttonhole. Okay. So I'm going to pop him underneath here and put that down. Let's make sure he's not, whoop, I didn't put him back far enough. He found the needle, found the button. Okay. Okay, 1, 2. Okay. And for good measure, I think I'm going to run him again. Okay. So now let me pull this thread out a little bit, put the needle up, foot up, and then we'll slide him off that piece, hold that down, give us our tail. Okay, so then what you want to do is, you can see there's some give here. So you want to find your thread, and it works really easy if you have like a seam ripper or something, or a little thread to feed him back through. Let's see if I can even, maybe I can get him through the hole. I'm making this look really easy, aren't I? You know, fun. There we go. Now he's to the back side, and then we'll run him to the same back side, and he's got a clean end on him, so that's fine. And I want to show you something else before I wrap it. Oops. Come on, in you go. There you go. Okay, so now he's to the back. Now, when it's just like this, can you see how messy that looks? See all the threads? That's because this is so loose, because it's a longer piece of thread. So then what you want to do is put some tension on it, take your thread tails, and wrap it around, and then you would take a needle and thread, and then you're going to put it to the back, and you can tie it off there. But then you give in your button a shank, and then it tightens that up. And now, why do you want a shank? If you're working with wool or something like that, the fabric itself is thick, and you want the button to sit flush on the fabric. You don't want it being, you know, like puckered in. So I hope that makes sense. So as an example, let me grab this guy when I want to grab these, because they don't, the same thing doesn't apply. Okay, so on this jacket, it's a really cool jacket, but you can see it has these wonderful buttons, and these are great, and they have the keyhole buttonhole, because for one, there's a shank on the button. So you want to use a keyhole buttonhole if you have a shank on your button. And if your fabric is thick, then this will lay nice and flat, and it doesn't pull or pucker. So that's the key for using a keyhole buttonhole. Okay, now when I use this sew-on button stitch, the holes in buttons, no matter if they're small or big, unless they're antique buttons, there is kind of a standard width that you will find the holes the distance between the holes, okay? So this red button is going to have the same distance between the holes as this button and a smaller button. Where that doesn't apply is craft buttons. If you take a look at this one, look at the large space between that. So you would need to adjust the width of the stitch on your machine and hand test to make sure that it is going to clear. And one way to do that, you could just take some paper, put your button over the paper and use a straight pin to mark your left and right position, and then hand turn to see if your needle is going in the right spot, because you definitely don't want to impact the button with your needle. So anyway, so crafty buttons or things that you may buy in clearance, always check. We'll always check the width anyway, but you might need to adjust. The rest of them are all about the same, and so you should be good to go, but it's always still good to test. So that's what we have for buttonholes. So I hope you enjoy, and don't be afraid to sew your own buttons.